What if the number you've been chasing isn't actually the thing that determines whether you can retire? Most of us have been conditioned to believe in a singular, symbolic milestone. We've been told that $1 million is the entry fee for a life of freedom, the round number that provides psychological permission to stop trading time for money. But there's a quiet reality that most retirement calculators won't show you. Many people who retire early and stay retired never actually hit that seven-figure mark before they walked away. They didn't just chase a number, they built a structure. And that structure allowed them to reclaim years of their lives that their peers spent grinding toward a milestone they didn't actually need. If you're currently somewhere between 300K and 900K, you've likely felt the weight of that myth. You're saving aggressively. You're watching the number climb. But the finish line feels like it keeps retreating. You wonder if you're stuck in a decade-long waiting room, deferred by a mathematical assumption you never actually interrogated. You see others retiring at 45 or 50, and the immediate assumption is that they must have had a windfall, a massive inheritance, some stroke of luck that isn't available to you. But the math of early freedom is often less about the size of the bucket and more about the diameter of the pipe. There is a fundamental difference between a number-based retirement and a structure-based retirement. A number-based retirement is fragile. It relies on the belief that once you cross a specific threshold, the math will simply work forever. A structure-based retirement relies on three variables that matter far more than reaching any round number milestone. Most people spend their entire careers focused on the first variable, the total asset pile. But if you ignore the other two, even $2 million might not be enough to keep you retired. Conversely, if you master the other two, the $1 million requirement often begins to dissolve. Three factors quietly determine early retirement more than a $1 million milestone. We'll get to all three, but one of them most retirement calculators don't include at all. The $1 million threshold became culturally dominant for a reason. It has internal logic. If you withdraw 4% annually from a $1 million portfolio, you get $40,000 per year, roughly in the range of modest living expenses for many households. The round number stuck. The problem is that the 4% figure was a planning guideline developed from historical market data, not a guarantee and not a universal prescription. It was designed for a 30-year traditional retirement horizon beginning around age 65. When you're looking at a 40 or 50-year horizon, the math changes. And the number itself is a function of your spending, not the other way around. Someone spending $35,000 a year needs roughly $875,000 at a 4% rate. Someone spending $60,000 needs $1.5 million. Someone spending $28,000 needs considerably less than $1 million. The milestone was never universal. It was a shortcut. And shortcuts, by design, don't account for the specifics of your actual life. We've also been taught to view retirement as a binary switch. You're either working or you're retired. You're either saving or you're spending. But for those pursuing early freedom, that binary is a trap. It eliminates an entire category of structural possibility. So what actually determines whether early retirement works? The first factor is your spending baseline, and specifically, the difference between your baseline costs and your discretionary layer. Most retirement models assume fixed real spending, same amount adjusted for inflation every year for decades. But that's not how people actually live. We are naturally adaptive. Spending isn't a fixed line. It has a floor and a ceiling. When you separate your survival costs from your lifestyle costs, something important happens. The amount of capital required to cover your actual baseline, the non-negotiable expenses, is often meaningfully lower than your total lifestyle spend. And if a smaller, more stable portfolio can cover the baseline, the pressure on the $1 million milestone begins to lift. The second factor is withdrawal flexibility, and this is where the structure starts to work differently than most models suggest. If you retire at $700K and the market drops 20% in year one, a rigid 4% withdrawal strategy creates real risk. But if your retirement structure includes income flexibility, the ability to reduce or pause withdrawals during a downturn, you're not locked into drawing from a portfolio while it's declining. Some early retirees use a coast fire or barista fire structure to manage this. They cover discretionary spending with low-stress part-time work or a passion project, while the core portfolio handles the baseline. This isn't failing at retirement. It's designing a strategy where you aren't a hostage to sequence of returns risk in the early years. One of these three factors almost nobody includes in standard retirement calculators. It's not a market variable, it's a structural one. The third factor is spending flexibility, and it's the one that changes the calculation the most. In a traditional retirement model, you need $1 million so you can safely pull $40,000 a year. But if you can design a life where you live comfortably on $35,000 in a difficult year and $55,000 in a strong one, the safety of your portfolio moves from a fixed number to a dynamic range. That flexibility directly addresses the single biggest structural threat to an early retiree: sequence of returns risk. If markets decline significantly in the first few years after you retire, and you're drawing from the portfolio through that decline, the damage is disproportionately hard to recover from, even if average long-term returns remain healthy. Flexible spending reduces the severity of that risk. If you can pull back withdrawals during a market trough, you don't need the same size buffer that the $1 million milestone is intended to provide. The lifestyle design itself becomes the insurance policy. This is where most early retirement plans quietly run into problems, not from the portfolio math, but from a structure that was never built to flex. Of course, none of this eliminates the real complications that early retirement introduces. It just reframes where the risk actually lives. Healthcare is a genuine variable. In traditional retirement, Medicare typically begins at 65. An early retiree spends years managing private health insurance costs that can shift significantly year to year. A retirement model that doesn't account for that gap is likely underestimating actual expenses. Longevity matters too. A 4% withdrawal rate has a different risk profile over 45 years than it does over 30. A longer horizon requires more conservatism or more flexibility built into the structure from the start. And there is a fourth consideration that almost never appears in financial models: the psychological transition. A significant number of people who leave primary employment earlier than expected find the identity shift harder than they anticipated. The structure that work provided, the routine, the social dimension, the sense of forward motion, doesn't automatically transfer. Financial readiness and psychological readiness are separate thresholds. Both matter. Someone with $1.5 million and a rigid, high-burn lifestyle is often in a more precarious position than someone with $700K in a highly flexible, low-overhead structure. The number alone doesn't tell the story. The mistake many high savers make at $700K or $800K is believing they are almost there, when in reality, they might already be there if they were willing to change the structure. They stay in the office for another 3 or 4 years to reach the safe number, only to realize later that those were some of their healthiest, most capable years. They traded thousands of hours of life for a marginal increase in a probability score that was already high enough. The unlocked gate was there the whole time. They were just waiting for a number to tell them it was okay to walk through. Retirement isn't about reaching a number. It's about building a sustainable financial structure that supports the life you actually want. If your life requires $100,000 a year in fixed, non-negotiable costs, then $1 million isn't enough. You may need $2.5 million or more. But if you've designed a life with high utility, low-cost experiences and the flexibility to adjust when markets get volatile, the $1 million rule becomes more of a reference point than a requirement. When you stop asking, "How much do I need?" and start asking, "How can I structure my life to need less certainty?" the math of early retirement begins to look very different. Freedom comes from structure, not milestones. The door may have been unlocked for longer than you think. The question worth sitting with isn't how far you are from $1 million.
It's whether the structure you've built could already support the life you're waiting to live. If you want to go deeper, the next logical step is understanding how to calculate your own floor and ceiling withdrawal rates for a sub $1 million portfolio. That's where the structure becomes personal.